I'm just Nick, and this is the Catalinbread SFT pedal. First we'll hear the clean sound. And now with the SFT. And with the pick. SFT stands for this, and Catalinbread, I guess, can't say it, but I can say it also is supposed to suggest SVT. And recall the high-powered Ampeg tube heads that, though designed for bass, were often also used in the late 60s and early 70s for guitar. On their website, Catalinbread reference Get Your Yayas Out era stones and the sound of humbuckers through a big old SVT head. The sound of SVT, Ampeg SVT amps is associated with a very big, very sort of high impact bass sound that's can be overdriven in really dynamic ways, in ways that don't turn to mush and retain a fair amount of clarity and touch sensitivity. And in fact, that's what this pedal does. With bass, it's often hard to get a overdriven tone that's sort of nasty enough to really suggest heaviosity, but at the same time still can sit reasonably in a mix and won't just eat everything anywhere near the bass range of EQ and even some of the mid-range. Because when you start to distort any kind of a signal, you create all sorts of additional harmonic content, and you're also compressing the attack of the signal considerably. So they did something in the voicing of this pedal and the voicing the EQ controls that enables you to get some very heavy bass sounds that still pop out. It almost seems like as you increase the gain on this pedal, there's a mid-range emphasis that increases that enables you to retain some attack and some clarity. That's what I'm hearing. So again, clean sound on this bass. This is a Schecter bass, which sort of has a generic jazz bass type pickup and a sort of Music Man Stingray type humbucker pickup. I'm running them both, and with a pretty neutral sound into a 112 SWR combo. Nothing terribly strange about this sound or distinctive about it. When I grow up, I want to be a bass player. I really do. And when we kick on the SVT, we not only get heaviosity and fuzz, but we get a little bit of a mid-range bump that's going to sort of compensate for the compression that we're going to get with that distortion and still make that bass line come through. It's not going to be too corpulent and too fuzzed out for us to really hear it. It's not going to eat everything else on the bottom end of our recording or live mix. We have a lot of control with the EQ knobs. If I crank the bass all the way up, it's going to sort of balance or bring back some of that bottom end that relative to the mid-range bump, we perceive as being cut a little bit with it set flat. So when we crank it up, and it also gets a little bit more distorted. So if we wanted more bottom end but the same amount of gain, we would back off the gain knob and get a much lighter but still really kind of dynamic and nasty. And notice on the lower gain ranges that dynamism of the pedal, its touch sensitivity is really evident. Pick lightly and you get a dark kind of tube bass amp running clean type of sound. Pick heavily and that mid-range starts to really come. That mid-range really starts to jump out with a kind of fuzziness. At the very low end, this pedal becomes almost like an amp emulation pedal without any distortion, really, with just a touch of maybe of a very light touch of kind of a warm, tubes just beginning to saturate. And for comparison, you know, the very clean SWR, you know, not running at high volume. And so this pedal has huge range and is capable of some really crazy fuzzed out, you know, Larry Graham getting nutty with it. And you can use the volume knob on your bass, just like the guitarist can, to clean it up really nicely. So, if you're a bass player, you get all of the sorts of nice features and nice response that guitar players are getting out of their expensive boutique overdrives, and yet you're still going to be able to be heard. This thing is really voiced beautifully for bass. So let's see what this sounds like with the guitar. Clean sound first. And with the SFT. Damned if it doesn't really suggest that, yeah, late 60s, early 70s Stones thing of, you know, semi-hollow through a big old Ampeg tube rig, SVT. It's a pretty dynamic sound. It just has a particular tonality to it that's kind of gritty and nasty, but stays pretty tight on the bottom. And is not excessively sort of mid-range boosted. Hard to describe, but you can hear it right away. It's just that something dark about it. Bottom end is big and a little bit loose in a nice way. Mind you, we're plugged into a pretty small amp. It's a Silverface Princeton reverb you can see behind me with a single 10-inch speaker in it. And this thing, you know, is doing a whole lot to change its sound. You'll note there's a big range of what you can do with this pedal. If you turn the gain all the way down, it really becomes kind of almost just a straight-up emulation of an Ampeg, you know, SVT head without really adding any distortion. Without it. Rolls off the top a little bit, makes the bottom a little bit bigger. And as we bring up the gain, you know, we can get into pretty saturated territory, but again with a very, you know, very distinctive type of tonality to it. A lot of range on the bottom end and the top end, but it still maintains that basic sound that's reminiscent of you know, running a guitar through a big old tube stack that's you know, designed for bass but sounds phenomenal on guitar. What else can I say about this? There's really only so many ways of clipping a guitar signal or a bass signal. I think that there's a relatively small number of circuit designs that are used to do this, and what makes the difference between one pedal and another, as far as I can tell, are the particular values that somebody chooses for the components and how they tweak it. And I think when that's done successfully, it's done successfully because what's driving the process is somebody's ears. Somebody's listening to create a particular tone that they find musical and compelling, and they're thinking about how that's going to work in different contexts, in a live mix, in a studio mix, how it's going to fit in with other instruments. And they're really doing something musical in designing the pedal, and the result you get is musical. It's something that we can use to make cool music. And I find that consistently, I gotta say, with the Catalinbread pedals, is it really seems like some person or number of people over there are really using their ears and thinking about the whole process as part of music, which I think is extremely cool. So if you're looking for an extremely functional and cool sounding bass overdrive that will also give you some very distinctive and useful tones on guitar, check out the SVT from Catalinbread. Check it out at rockandrollvintage.com. Cool people. You know, today I didn't dress to match the pedal, but I do have a couple days growth. Hopefully you find it appealing and not repellent, but either way, to me it suggests kind of the sort of rough around the edges, faintly sexy quality of the sound that you can get with this pedal. But that's just me. Till next time, I'm just Nick.